Hey, this is Brooks with BrooksBrownCoaching.com, and in this video I'm going to discuss how your current body composition could be affecting your hormone levels. So I've made a couple of videos already that pertain really to diet and some supplementation and how those things can try to improve your testosterone levels, but I realized that I should probably give people a really basic overview of what your current body composition is doing to affect your hormone levels. Because if you are severely out of shape and you're just trying to take supplements to improve those levels, you're probably not going to be very successful. Supplementation and diet modification to improve something like a testosterone level should probably be sort of the icing on the cake rather than your really basic plan. So mainly in this video, I'll discuss things like your level of fat on your body and your level of muscle tissue and how those things can affect things like testosterone levels, erectile dysfunction, anything that you would normally associate with those hormonal levels. So first, I'll discuss a couple of studies that kind of give some credence to this idea that higher body fat has a pretty strong impact on hormones, maybe more than you would imagine. And then we'll get into why that's actually happening. So first off, I just want to go through a couple of things. I'm going to discuss body mass index, which is a measure of weight per height. I'll put a link to a calculator in the description so you can get on there, put in your weight and height, and get an idea of what your body mass index is so you can see where you kind of fit in when I start talking about some of these numbers. Additionally, the main indicator I'll talk about is waist circumference. I'll put a picture here of how you can measure your waist circumference. Pretty simple. Just get you a tape measure and make sure you put it in the right spot. So first off, just to show you why we're talking about this, an NERI study showed that in a group of about 1,600 men, that the single biggest indicator of low testosterone levels was waist circumference. The single biggest. They measured a bunch of different indicators like age, diet, all this type of stuff, the things that you would typically imagine. The number one biggest indicator for low testosterone levels was waist circumference. So the higher the waist circumference, more likely the participant had lower testosterone levels. And with the BMI correlation, studies have shown that a 1% increase in BMI leads to a 2% decrease in testosterone levels. So to give you an idea of range, normal is somewhere between 20 and 25, I believe. 25 to 30 is considered overweight. Over 30 is obese. And then things start to get a little hairy as far as who considers what. Over 35 or 40, I think you get into morbidly obese. And then it just goes on from there. So a lot of the stuff we'll talk about will be kind of in the overweight range at 25 to 30, and then the 30 plus range, which is where you're really getting into dangerous territory. So a 4% increase or a 4-inch increase in your waist circumference also increased the odds of having low testosterone by about 75%. 4 inches on the waist, 75% increase in low testosterone levels. Now, I guess I should tell you what low testosterone levels are. So low testosterone would be considered hypogonadal, hypo meaning low. So that's usually under 300 nanograms per deciliter, which is your circulating testosterone. Normal, it depends on the country really, but kind of accepted is somewhere between 300 and 900 nanograms per deciliter. Now, men will respond differently to those testosterone levels based on your genetics. There might be a guy that has 400 nanograms per deciliter that feels better, feels more masculine, doesn't have low testosterone side effects, versus a guy that has 600 nanograms per deciliter. And maybe that guy feels tired, unmotivated, low libido. So it's not a perfect measurement of how you're going to feel, but we do know sort of a range. And that's why that range is pretty wide, 300 to 900 nanograms per deciliter. So again, going back to telling you that a 4-inch increase in your waist increases your odds of having low testosterone by 75%. That's not a huge difference. You think of a difference of wearing a size 32, maybe when you were in high school or college, and now wearing a size 36, or maybe wearing a size 40. You've jumped up 8 inches, 75% increase per 4 inches. So you're looking at 150% increase and having a chance of having low testosterone levels. Now, I said at the beginning that an increase in waist circumference is a better indicator of low testosterone than any other indicator, including age. That was illustrated in this study when they showed that 10 years of aging only increased the odds of low testosterone by 36%, which means 20 years of aging does not increase your chances of low testosterone as much as 4 inches on your waist circumference. That's crazy. So you could reduce your odds of low testosterone essentially by 20 years by just losing 4 inches off your waist. Now, the reason that I'm saying waist circumference and not, percent body fat, because some people, when I say body mass index, are going to roll their eyes. And I get it, because that's not necessarily a great measurement of body fat, particularly for athletes. If you carry around a lot of muscle mass, then, or if you're real tall, then body mass index might be a little bit off because it's just weight per height. So for instance, for me, I'm 6'5", I weigh a little over 210 pounds. My BMI is right at about 25. Now, I have relatively low body fat, but because of that weight, I do have that higher BMI. For the average person, BMI is a pretty good indicator. However, there's no getting around that waist circumference indicator. That is regardless of muscle mass. And it's important that we're measuring around the waist and not necessarily around the thigh or the wrist or the neck, because a higher waist circumference means you have more fat around your organs, more visceral fat, which is very different than subcutaneous fat. And again, I told you I would tell you, what's going on. Why are these numbers actually good indicators of low testosterone? So we'll get to that in just a minute. But back to the whole idea of age not being as good an indicator as waist circumference. So there was a study done in 2012, again, about 1,600 men. These men were between the ages of 50 and 80 years old. And when they measured their testosterone levels, they took the mean of the group. So they selected these people just on age, and they found that the mean group, meaning sort of the middle, sort of your average person in that group, their testosterone levels range from 464 to 479. So the youngest group, 50 to 60 years old, their mean testosterone was 479. Between 70 and 80, their mean testosterone was 464. Only a difference of 15 points, 15 nanograms per deciliter. So really small change over 30 years, which tells us that body mass index and the amount of fat you're carrying on your body is a better indicator in age, when we used to think age was a big deal, which could mean that age really isn't directly related to low testosterone levels. It's actually the things that come with aging. Now, that might sound really obvious, but what I mean is behavioral change that comes when you age. So maybe you're less active, you're not doing the sports you used to do, you don't get out and do as much as you used to do. And that is what has led to a higher level of body fat, which in turn leads to lower testosterone levels. So aging in itself does not mean that your testosterone levels will increase, which should be encouraging, because you probably have heard that over 30, you lose 1% of your testosterone per year forever. Well, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case as long as you're keeping your body composition in check. Now, you know that testosterone is responsible for things like muscle growth and libido, and we can even look at things like BMI and waist circumference and predict the chances of something like erectile dysfunction. So somebody with a BMI over 28 increases their odds of developing erectile dysfunction by 90%. 90%. That's not even in the obese category. You're just overweight at 28. You got 2 points to go till you're obese, and at that level, you've increased your odds of ED by 90%. Additionally, a man with a waist of 42 inches is twice as likely to have erectile dysfunction as a man with a waist of 32 inches, and that is regardless of BMI. So, again, that waist circumference and the BMI playing a big role in your testosterone production and chances of erectile dysfunction. A Harvard study also showed that men with a waist over 43 inches were 2.5 times more likely to need surgery for benign prostate hyperplasia as a man with a waist size under 35 inches. Now, it's hard to tell exactly why that is. I discussed in another video the idea that DHT levels do lead to increased prostate size. And at this level, they lead to increase in prostate size that would necessitate surgery. However, there's another thing likely at play here, which is insulin levels. Now, I'm going to make a whole video at some point about insulin sensitivity, but it's a pretty complex subject and has way further implications beyond just testosterone levels. But it is important to know that if you are very overweight, you're carrying a high amount of body fat, particularly if you have a lot of fat around your stomach, there's a strong possibility that you could be experiencing insulin insensitivity or insulin resistance. And that high level of circulating insulin can lead to a lot of negative things. One of the very first signs of insulin resistance is erectile dysfunction. So good thing to talk to a doctor about if you are experiencing erectile dysfunction. Get your insulin levels checked, not just your glucose levels, but your insulin levels. That is different. And just having normal glucose levels does not necessarily mean that you have healthy insulin sensitivity. So what is all this fat doing? Just being fat just weighing more wouldn't mean that you have low testosterone levels. So what is going on with the fat? Well, fat is not just stored energy. That is one of its functions, to be stored around the body. So when we need to tap into energy reservoirs, we have it. That's essentially what fat is stored energy. However, it's also a part of your endocrine system, which might be surprising to some people because we typically think of endocrine system as something like your adrenal glands, your testes, ovaries, pituitary gland, something like that that's secreting a hormone. Well, fat is secreting hormones. They're actually secreting these compounds called adipokines. Adipose being fats, adipose tissue is fat tissue. So if you hear adipo as the prefix in a word, it's probably relating to fat. Adipokines being something that's secreted from your fat cells. So one of the first ones that if you've watched my video, you have heard me talk about is aromatase. So this is an enzyme that's being secreted from your fat cells that is converting testosterone into estrogen. Another part of the human body that does this, not the male body, but females are making this conversion in the ovaries. So if you have a lot of visceral fat, a lot of fat around your stomach, as a man, your fat is essentially acting like an ovary. You're producing a lot of aromatase, which is turning your testosterone into estrogen, which can lead to lower levels of muscle mass, which can make your body less sensitive to insulin, which can lead to more weight gain, which means more fat, which means more aromatase, more estrogen, less muscle, on and on and on. So you can see why it's really important to sort of arrest this process and start going back the other way. Now, what else is this fat secreting? Well, a big thing that your fat is secreting is a chemical called leptin. Now, leptin is responsible for making, among some other things, making you feel satiated, meaning when you eat, leptin is secreted and tells your body that you are fed. We don't need any more energy. You have enough energy. Now, if you have a lot of fat cells and you're producing a lot of leptin, just like anything else, in the same way I'm talking about insulin resistance, receptors in your body build tolerance to the chemicals they're exposed to if they are exposed to them in too high of levels. Just like someone who takes a drug may start to build a tolerance to it, or drinks alcohol, how they will start to build a tolerance to that alcohol. They can drink more and more without having the same effect. Well, these receptors in your body do the same thing. So your leptin receptors in your brain that normally when they would experience a normal amount of leptin would say, all right, we're done. We don't need to keep eating. We're in a fed state. Well, if they continue to experience really high levels of leptin because your fat cells are always producing it, they get that immunity to it. They build up that tolerance where they can keep sending the signal to eat more and more, even though they have those high leptin levels because they're so used to experiencing them all the time. So reducing the amount of body fat can reduce that amount of leptin in the body, which will sensitize those receptors again. So when you eat and you get that leptin signal to the brain that tells you, hey, that's enough, stop eating, you'll respond to it. All right. So leptin, another adipokine that's coming from, those fat cells. Adiponectin, this is another chemical being secreted from your fat cells. Now, this is actually a protein hormone that's produced in the fat, and it is protective against diabetes and cardiovascular disease and is anti-inflammatory. Now, that sounds good, and that is good. Oddly enough, and we're not exactly sure why this takes place, but the more fat cells you have, the less of this adiponectin is produced and the less effective it is, to finally a point of being ineffective in severely obese individuals, which those are the type of people that really need the most protection against inflammation and cardiovascular disease. So lower levels of fat, losing some fat, can increase your levels of adiponectin, which helps you protect against that cardiovascular disease, inflammation, and diabetes. Another chemical that's being secreted is Omentin. Similar to adiponectin, it is anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, anti-cardiovascular disease. Also, like adiponectin, the higher levels of fat that you have, the lower levels of Omentin that you're going to have. So you're not getting that type of protection. So what's the most important thing you can do with this information? Obviously, it would be to start to lose body fat. Now, there's really good evidence that certain types of dieting will reduce the fat around your stomach better than other types of diets or other types of exercise. So knowing really what you're doing there to help reduce that visceral fat is important. A lot of people will tell you that you can't spot reduce fat, and I somewhat agree with that. If you are 50 pounds overweight and you do a bunch of sit-ups, but you don't change your diet, you're not going to have abs, right? So that's more about what I think about when you think of spot reducing. If you have a high level of body fat, you're not going to pull body fat off of just one place. However, if the deposits of your body fat are due to something like your current hormone profile or the types of food you're eating or your insulin profile or your blood glucose levels, that may be changed more dramatically in one area initially versus regular weight loss if we're doing things like eating a diet that has a lower glycemic index. So generally, weight loss is going to be a good idea. You can improve those outcomes with particular types of weight loss and particular types of diet and exercise. But, just starting at the idea of you're going to lose some weight is a good idea. Additionally, increasing your muscle mass. So muscle mass is the number one insulin sensitizing organ in the body because it burns up the most glucose, which is what's causing that insulin response, which blah, blah, blah. Like I said, I would discuss this more in a different video, but just knowing very basically, if you decrease your body fat and increase your muscle mass, that in itself is likely to improve your testosterone levels based on all the information I gave you here. Just think about if you could drop 4 inches off your waist, you're reducing those odds of low testosterone by 75%. That's a big thing. So, now that we have this sort of baseline understanding of, your body fat is producing some chemicals that we don't necessarily want to produce, and it's producing something we do want, and this idea that the number one predictor of low testosterone is your waist circumference, it's time to consider losing weight if you are in that position that, if some of these numbers are a little bit scary to you, there's definitely something you can do about it. I'd be happy to help if I can. BrooksBrownCoaching.com. I help people with weight loss and work with some of your diet. Nothing that I do, I am not telling you I'm treating any disease. I am not, curing whatever ails you, unless what ails you is being overweight. So you can check that out and get in touch with me there. Additionally, I'd appreciate it if you made it this long with me to subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and comment below if you have any questions or if there are any other video topics that you would like for me to discuss. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again next time.